In the monotonous, often predictable rhythm of Los Angeles, in a small roadside establishment called the Open Road Diner, a young woman named Elena tirelessly worked to make ends meet. She lived with her mother, carefully budgeting every penny to sustain their lives. Today, in fact, was her mother's birthday, but instead of celebrating, Elena was stuck working a double shift, plagued by a persistent sense of guilt. Each smile she offered to customers was a carefully constructed facade, concealing the visible weariness on her face and the heavy burden on her shoulders. What Elena didn't know was that on this very night, a man would walk through the door. He was a famous Hollywood actor, someone no one expected to find in such a humble diner. It was Keanu Reeves. His eyes, as always, calmly and carefully scanned his surroundings. What he would do next would leave everyone speechless and change Elena's life forever. The secret hidden within a small tip was not just a gift, but a calling from the past, a sign of a forgotten connection. Elena woke up early, just like she did every day. The small apartment she shared with her mother, Clara, was quiet, except for the faint hum of the old radio from the kitchen. Clara sat at the table, by her sewing machine, mending worn fabrics. Her aged hands bore the weight of life. "Good morning, Mom," Elena said, trying to sound cheerful as she kissed her mother's forehead. Clara smiled, but it was a shy, almost subdued smile. She handed Elena a small doll's dress she had just finished. It was a simple yet touching piece, a replica of something Clara had sewn for her own childhood. "It's beautiful, Mom. Your talent hasn't faded," Elena praised, trying to ignore the heaviness in her chest. As Clara returned to her work, Elena began preparing breakfast with the meager provisions they had in the fridge, stale bread and milk mixed with water. Always observant, Clara broke the silence. "My daughter, I know you're very tired. Perhaps you should rest today." Elena paused, feeling a pang in her heart. She had to hide all her worries from her mother. "Oh, Mom, don't worry. I'm fine. I have an important shift today." Clara nodded quietly, not pressing the matter. But as Elena placed the plate in front of her, Clara's question caught her off guard. "I just wish you didn't have to work so much, my girl." Elena smiled, though her heart felt like it was breaking. "I work so much because I want to give you the best future, Mom, and one day all of this will be worth it." Clara smiled back, and Elena, even as her mother's words continued to echo in her mind, prepared to face another workday. Little did she know that night, something extraordinary was about to happen that would change their lives forever. The diner where Elena worked wasn't large, nor was it particularly charming. It was a simple place with wooden tables worn down by time and chairs that creaked under the weight of the customers. The floor, always clean but visibly aged, reflected the staff's dedication to maintaining the space despite limited resources. Elena hurried inside, adjusting her apron as she greeted her coworkers. It was another busy morning, like any other. The clientele mostly consisted of locals and travelers stopping in for a quick coffee before hitting the road. The air was filled with the comforting aroma of fresh coffee and frying bacon, a smell that brought customers comfort, but to Elena symbolized long hours of hard, tiring work. She began her usual routine, serving coffee, cleaning tables, and taking orders. Each smile she offered was carefully rehearsed, a mask hiding her physical and emotional exhaustion. Even while she delivered plates or answered trivial questions from customers, her thoughts wandered. She thought of her mother, wondering if she was okay home alone, perhaps sewing or listening to the radio. "Elena, table 7!" A coworker, Mark, called, pulling her out of her thoughts. She rushed to the indicated table where a regular customer patiently awaited his coffee. Elena knew many of their orders by heart. The elderly couple who always shared a pancake, the trucker who ordered eggs with bacon and strong coffee. These familiar faces made her monotonous routine just a little more bearable. Between tables, Elena paused for a moment by the window to glance outside. Sunlight streamed softly through the glass, but in her heart, everything felt cloudy. She remembered her mother's question about why life was so hard. Her mother's words seemed to echo in her mind. Am I doing enough? Will things really ever get better? Or am I just fooling myself? By mid-afternoon, as she was clearing empty plates from a table, the bell above the door jingled again, signaling the arrival of another customer. Still lost in her thoughts, Elena glanced up briefly, but what she saw made her freeze for a moment. A man had walked in. He seemed out of place, not because of how he was dressed, but because of his presence. Tall, with slightly long hair and a scruffy beard, he wore simple clothes and carried a backpack that looked heavy. Elena felt an inexplicable wave of curiosity. There was something about him, something familiar, yet mysterious. For reasons she couldn't quite explain, she couldn't take her eyes off him. The man chose a table in the corner of the diner and sat down quietly. He glanced around, taking in the surroundings with a calm yet introspective air. "Elena, table 8, Mark called out again. Shaking her head to snap herself back to reality, Elena grabbed her notepad and headed toward the table. Still, as she walked toward the mysterious man, her heart raced as though something significant was about to happen. Elena approached the corner table where the man was seated, clutching her notepad with slightly trembling hands. She couldn't explain why, but there was something about him that made her uncomfortably intrigued. When he looked up to greet her, she was caught off guard by the kindness yet intensity in his gaze. "Good afternoon, can I take your order?" Elena asked, trying to maintain her composure. The man smiled, a smile that was both warm and melancholic. "Of course. I'll have a black coffee and pancakes, please." He spoke calmly, with a voice that carried an odd familiarity. Laura frowned slightly, trying to recall if she'd seen him before, but she couldn't place where that feeling came from. "I'll bring that right over," she said, quickly jotting down the order as she walked away. Elena couldn't resist glancing back over her shoulder. The man sat with his hands clasped together, staring out the window as if lost in thought. There was something about him that seemed to carry stories, as if every line on his face reflected pains and experiences he rarely shared. In the kitchen, while preparing the order, Elena couldn't help but mention him to her coworker. "Did you see the guy who just came in?" "Yeah, I saw him. Looks like one of those drifters, you know, but he doesn't seem dangerous if that's what you're thinking." "No, that's not it," Elena replied, distracted. "I just feel like I've seen him before. I don't know where." When the order was ready, she brought it to his table. She set the coffee and pancakes in front of him with her professional smile. "Here you go. Hope you enjoy it." "Thank you," he replied, looking directly into her eyes for a brief moment. Elena felt as though he could see beyond the surface, as if he understood the weight she carried. Before she could walk away, he asked, "Have you been working here long?" Elena hesitated, not expecting the question. "Oh, it's been a few years now. It's honest work, and it looks like you take it seriously." He gave her a small smile, but there was a sincerity in his tone that disarmed her. "Well, I do what I can," she replied, slightly embarrassed. "What brought you here?" he asked, his curiosity sounding genuine. Elena paused for a few seconds. Normally, she hated when customers asked personal questions, but there was something different about the way he asked. It was as if he truly wanted to hear her answer, not just fill the silence. "Life. That's just how things turned out, I guess," she shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant, but the truth was evident in her eyes. "I see," he said simply, as if those two words held a deeper meaning. As Elena walked away, her mind raced. Who was this man? Why did he feel so different from any other customer she'd ever served? While cleaning another table, she couldn't help but glance back at him again. He was sitting calmly, sipping his coffee and eating his pancakes, but his eyes were fixed on the window as though he was seeing something far beyond what anyone else could. Little did she know, this man carried something that would change her life forever. The afternoon at the diner dragged on slowly. The rush of customers had begun to die down, and Elena felt exhausted. Her feet ached, and her mind was torn between work and thoughts of her mother. Yet something kept drawing her attention back to the man sitting in the corner booth. He remained there, calmly sipping his coffee and gazing out the window, as if time had slowed down around him. When Elena approached his table to check if he needed anything, he looked up. His gaze made her pause, as if he could see past the professional mask she was trying to maintain. "More coffee?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He gave a faint smile. "No, thank you. I'm good." There was a brief silence. Elena was about to walk away when he caught her off guard. "You seem to have a lot on your shoulders. Are you okay?" The question made her freeze for a moment. She hadn't expected something so direct, especially from a customer she had just met. For a second, she thought about brushing it off, but there was something about his tone, sincere and pathetic, that disarmed her. "Well, it's not always easy," she admitted with a weak smile. "It never is," he replied thoughtfully, "but sometimes it helps to talk about it, even if just a little." Elena hesitated. She wasn't the type to open up about her life to strangers. But this man felt different. He wasn't just being nosy like so many others. He genuinely seemed to want to listen. "Well, today is my mother's birthday," she began, glancing away for a moment. "Clara, I can't celebrate her birthday." He nodded gently, encouraging her to continue. "I wanted to do something special for her, you know? A party, a cake, a gift. But—" Elena paused, trying to hold back the emotions threatening to surface. "Since I lost my father, things haven't been easy. I try, but it always feels like something's missing." The man remained silent, his eyes locked on hers, filled with an understanding that Elena couldn't quite explain. "My mother means everything to me," she went on, her voice beginning to waver. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. She deserves so much, and I can only give so little." She stopped, surprised at how much she had just shared. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she had kept it all bottled up for so long. "What you're doing for her is bigger than any party or gift," he said finally, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're giving her your love, and that's what matters most." His words made Elena take a deep breath. She didn't know why, but she felt a momentary relief, as if someone had finally acknowledged her struggle. "Thank you," she said softly, offering a weak smile. The man returned her smile and quietly finished his coffee. Elena moved on to tend to another table, but she couldn't stop thinking about their conversation. When she returned to the corner booth later, she noticed he was gone. On the table next to the payment, there was a carefully folded white envelope. Elena picked it up with trembling hands, her heart racing. Something told her this man wasn't just another customer, and as she opened the envelope, she would soon find out why. Elena stood still for a moment, staring at the white envelope left on the table. Her heart raced as she felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness. What could that man have left behind? With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside, there was a folded note and something heavier, a check. Elena picked up the note first, carefully unfolding it. The handwriting was simple yet elegant, and the words she read made her stop breathing for a moment. "Use this to fulfill your mother's wish. You're stronger than you realize, and your love is the greatest gift she could ever receive. Never give up." The words echoed in her mind as tears began to stream down her face. Her body tensed as if trying to contain the overwhelming emotions washing over her. Finally, she looked at the check. When her eyes fell on the amount, she could hardly believe it. It was more money than she could earn in months at the diner. But what truly left her speechless was the name signed at the bottom, Keanu Reeves. Elena blinked several times, trying to process what was in front of her. The man she had served, the mysterious, attentive stranger, was none other than the movie star she had seen in so many films. She sank into the nearest chair, her legs feeling weak. She thought back to how he had listened to her with such patience, how he had responded with words that seemed to perfectly address her struggles. And now he had left something that could completely change her and Clara's lives. As she held the note and the check in her hands, her coworker Mark walked into the kitchen, his face full of concern. "Elena, are you okay? You look shaken." Elena looked up at him, still struggling to find her voice. That man," she began, but her voice cracked. "He left this." Mark leaned in to take a look, his eyes widening as he saw the check. "Oh my God, is this real? Is this actually real?" he asked, nearly shouting. Elena simply nodded, still in a state of shock. "He said, or he wrote, that I should use it to make my mother's wish come true," Elena said, holding the note delicately. Mark stared at her wide-eyed with disbelief. "This is like something out of a movie, Elena. Something you see on TV." Elena laughed, even though tears were still streaming down her face. In a way, it did feel like she was living in a scene too surreal to be real. After a moment, Elena took a deep breath and stood up. "I need to go home. I need to see Mom." "Go, go," Mark said, waving his hands. "I'll cover the rest of your shift." Elena didn't think twice. She carefully placed the note and check in her bag and left the diner. The afternoon sun seemed brighter than before, as if the world around her had somehow changed. On her way home, she laughed and cried simultaneously, feeling a mix of gratitude, relief, and hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. Finally, it seemed things were starting to turn around. Elena rushed into the apartment, almost tripping over the pile of shoes scattered in the hallway. Clara sat on the living room floor by her sewing machine, deeply focused on yet another repair. When she heard the door open, she looked up and smiled. "My daughter, are you home early?" Clara said, running to hug her. Elena wrapped her arms around her mother, holding her tightly. She wasn't sure how to tell Clara what had happened, but a sense of joy and relief she hadn't felt in years filled her heart. "Mom, I have something to tell you," Elena said, cupping her mother's face in her hands. Clara looked at her with curiosity, tilting her head. "What is it, my daughter?" Elena sat down with Clara on their small couch and pulled the envelope from her bag. She took out the note first and handed it to her. "Read this, Mom." Clara carefully took the note, her eyes scanning the words written on it. When she finished, she looked up at Elena, confused. "Who wrote this?" Elena took a deep breath, her smile filled with emotion. "It was a man I served at the diner today. He left this for us." Clara's eyes widened. "He was that kind to you?" "He wasn't just kind, Mom. He did something incredible." Elena pulled the check from the envelope and showed it to Clara. The elderly woman stared at the piece of paper, not fully understanding its meaning, but feeling the excitement in her daughter's voice. "This means," Elena began, her voice trembling with tears she tried to hold back. "This means we can visit your sister in Texas. We can see her again." Clara's eyes widened even more now, glistening with joy. "Really, my daughter? For real?" Elena nodded, smiling. "Yes, Mom, for real." Clara let out an excited squeal and threw herself into Elena's lap, hugging her tightly. Elena laughed as tears finally rolled down her cheeks. In the days that followed, Elena began planning the trip. She called her Aunt Sophia in Texas, who was overjoyed to hear they would finally see them again. Meanwhile, Elena kept the note in a special place. She planned to frame it as a reminder that even on the darkest days, good things could happen. When they finally arrived in Texas, Clara ran into her sister's arms with a smile Elena would never forget. It was a simple moment, but to Elena, it felt as if the weight she had carried for years had lifted, even if just for a while. During the trip, Elena began to think about her own future, inspired by Keanu's gesture. She decided she couldn't keep living just to survive. With the remaining money, she started planning for something that could give her and Clara more stability. Perhaps going back to school or starting a small business. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream. On their last night in Texas, while Clara chatted with her sister in the backyard, Elena sat quietly, holding the note. She read the words again, feeling her hope renewed. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at the starry sky. She didn't know why that mysterious man had chosen to help her, but she was determined to make his gesture mean something even greater. With her mother by her side and a brighter future ahead, Elena finally felt ready to start a new chapter in her life.